All right. Welcome to episode 2 of the Dad at Arms podcast. I am your host, Dad at Arms, Colt, and I'm here today with a really cool guest. This is my good friend Tim. Hi, Tim.
Hey, Colt, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
I can't
So
believe
for
this is
those of
episode
you,
2. This is only episode 2.
yeah, this is
Oh,
only episode 2. So I did one episode last month,
I
and
I am
I got
honored.
you I got you on for my second episode, and it made me feel very special and happy. So,
You honor me. Thank you.
oh, thanks. So real quickly for people watching, let's introduce who you are, Tim. So
You want me to do it, or do you want to do it?
I I think you know yourself better than I do. So why don't you take at
That is not for certain, by the way.
it?
I am Tim Sheridan. I am a writer and producer. I live in Hollywood, California. That's not true. I actually live in a little area of Los Angeles, but I work in Hollywood, I guess is what I should say. Um, and if you've seen anything or read anything that I've done a lot. I've done a lot of stuff with DC Comics, actual comic books, but also I got my start in animation working on a show called Justice League Action. I did an adaptation of a famous Superman storyline called Reign of the Supermen as a movie. And The Long Halloween and the Superman movie called Man of Tomorrow. I've done a lot of that stuff. And I've also had the fortune of working on some of my I was a big DC kid, but I've also worked on some of my other most beloved um, characters. Since from when I was a kid, like Transformers: War for Cybertron on Netflix, and uh, Masters of the Universe, Revelation, and Revolution. Um,
Revolution.
yeah, you might have heard of a little show.
Yeah, I think I heard some rumors about you guys got a follow up. That's exciting news.
It is very exciting news. It's not really news to me anymore, though. I feel like
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to act like it's news. Like, oh wow, that's great.
So let's see. So they announced it in last summer, right? Was the official announcement for I think in June
In Geek
is
Week,
when they
yeah, it was
announced.
in June. Yeah,
Yeah,
June, July. Yeah.
yeah. Okay. All right. I interrupted you. Continue
Oh no,
telling
I mean that's
us.
it. That's all there is to say. I mean, I recently I did a run on Teen Titans called Teen Titans Academy for DC Comics, and I just wrapped a miniseries for DC called Flashpoint Beyond that I created with my friend Jeremy Adams and Jeff Johns, and that was just a really fun experience for a nerd like me. Getting to play in that world, getting invited to play in that world was unreal. So I'm basically, if I'm going to introduce myself, I'm just kind of living my nerd dream um, and getting to play with all the toys I played with as a kid. Some of them are behind me. Um, but I get to play with them on the page and on the screen. And it's kind of, you know, um, a, a life I never dreamed I'd get to live, but I'm so happy I get to live it.
Oh, that's incredible. What I think is really neat is, I've talked to you a few times and we kind of interact on, on different messaging apps and stuff like that. And it's really fun to see these different comic books that are in a world that I love too. Like I'm a DC guy. All my Batman guys are in front of me on the opposite wall, but
Yeah.
it's cool to be able to see your name pop up on these films and on these comic book covers. And I'm like, hey, I kind of know that guy, and that's
I know that
kind of a
guy.
neat little experience. So
Yeah.
that's really
Um,
cool.
that's cool. Yeah. I mean, listen, imagine what it's like for me. Like,
Oh, I'm sure.
in there, the Long
You're like, hey,
Halloween.
that's me.
I put on the Long Halloween, and it's like, written by Tim Sheridan. And I'm just like, that's impossible. Like, I mean, adapted by Tim Sheridan, certainly. Um,
Yeah.
these are A Long Halloween was, for me, such an important book, such an important story. Reign of the Supermen. Those were the very first Superman comics I ever bought when I was a
Wow.
kid. I never read Superman, but something about that storyline was so exciting to me at the time. And I was so excited about Eradicator and Cyborg Superman and Superboy and Steel. Like, I was in for the mystery of which, if any of them, were Superman. So to see my name up there is one thing. To
Yeah.
actually do the work with these people, people who for me are, legendary and should be for everyone. I get to work with a guy named Alan Burnett. I learned, much of what I know about writing for animation and for television from Alan Burnett and from Jim Krieg. And Alan is a legend. Batman the Animated Series, was another parent to me as a kid. you know like
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
show raised me. So it's been an incredible experience. But i'm glad that you're not too upset when you see my name up there.
No, not at all. I mean, you know, I watched The Long Halloween Part 1 and Part 2 when they came out, and it's such a important story for the Batman mythos, right? Like, it established so many things, and we see other Batman stories kind of pull inspiration from it. When I first watched The Dark Knight in theaters, like, there were moments in that movie where you could pinpoint, you're like, hey, that's an idea lifted from The Long Halloween, the
That's right.
origin of Two-Face. And
I mean, there's literal scenes that,
yeah, yeah,
money in the warehouse, like that's the things that, or set pieces from, and the origin of Two-Face, like you said, from Long Halloween. I mean, that clear inspiration, and there's obviously inspiration in the Batman,
hmm
the film that was just most recently released. But what we tried to do, I mean, we wanted to make a movie. I mean, first of all, making a movie is a very different proposition than writing a comic book, something that has been absolutely driven home for me as I have made a foray into comics, um, comic book writing. What a completely different animal it is. And so there were lots of challenges. And, we just had such an incredible team and really huge support from all the people at Warner Animation and Warner Home Entertainment, and DC Comics behind us. And so what we wanted to do was to take some of the themes that, like what I tried to do was take some of the themes that really I identified with, that made the Long Halloween such an important part of the Batman mythos, and expand upon them where I could. Obviously, that means you're going to, and just by the nature of making a movie, you're going to truncate and sort of streamline other things to do that. What you end up with whenever you do one of these adaptations is a the best way I can put it is like a version of that same story that might exist in another corner of the multiverse. Um, it just plays out maybe a little bit differently, but hopefully in its DNA, it's still the story that that and that you love and that you remember. Jim
right.
Krieg told me that when we first started working on Reign of the Supermen. He said, what we do when we adapt something like this is we try to make the movie of the thing you remember, not of the thing necessarily. And if you
hmm
can make the thing and just put it on screen, more power to you. But what's more important is that you try to make people feel the way they felt when they first read that story. And the best way to go about that is to actually, deal with the things that made you feel the way you felt when you read that story or when you read that story. And those are the things I tried to sort of expand upon. And happily, lots of other people out there sort of identified the same beats, the same things as being important and intrinsic to that story. And that's what made the Long Halloween movie the Long Halloween movie. And I think what made
hmm
it, successful was the fact that we focused on granular sort of stuff that we knew made up the DNA of the thing, and brought that to life in a new way for people, in a way that celebrates the source material. You know, there's lots of fans who I think look at when we make a movie adaptation or TV adaptation of something, they look at it as like we're trying to replace the book. We're trying
Right.
to this is the new version and it's new and improved. No, not I've never met anyone who I've worked with in this business who goes in with we all go in trying to celebrate the source material, to elevate
Yeah.
it a little bit in a different medium, so that when people see it and enjoy it, they will then seek out the original and go pick that up again and read that book again or watch that show again. You look at Masters of the Universe Revelation. I mean, for
Mhm.
us, it was a love letter to the classic era of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. And for people to watch that series and then go and rediscover classic, not only the animated show, but the comics and and even the toys.
Oh yeah.
That's what we're in the business of doing. Somebody once said we're in the business of nostalgia. We deal in nostalgia. I think that might not quite sell it. Like we definitely tread in the pool of nostalgia. Um, but we're of a generation that has a backlog, this canon of great stuff that we grew up with and that we hold dear. And so there's a lot of nostalgia already floating around. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so naturally we're going to write from that place and produce and create from that place. So that's what we try to do. That's what, like I said, we did with Revelations, what I did with Long Halloween, and the other stuff that I've worked on.
Yeah. Um, I think when you talk about nostalgia, I think nostalgia operates kind of it kind of we kind of look at it with rose tinted glasses. We remember it from when we were kids, and so we have those feelings attached to it. But I think the benefit of being, the age we are now, having grown up with these things and then revisiting them, for me at least, I want to see those things evolve to where I'm at and meet me where I'm at now.
Yeah,
I want to see them grow up a little bit with me.
yeah,
If I want to, if I want to watch, if I want to watch He-Man and the Masters of the Universe the way Filmation presented it, I have those all in my DVD collection. I can go watch those when I want.
but that's what I mean, because I don't know about you, but I think those of us who worked on that show, who have worked on that show, and we talk about it all the time, that
Hmm.
what we're putting on screen from our perspective is what we remember,
Yeah,
what lives in our memory. Because when we were kids watching that old show or reading those comics or playing with those toys, it was in our eyes so elevated, and it was nearly Shakespearean to us as kids.
yeah,
And so if you just do a one for one adaptation, it wouldn't it couldn't you couldn't do you just can't do it. It just wouldn't work. It has to, like you say, evolve and grow up with the viewer, um, because then it is going to be as you remember it when you were a kid.
yeah.
Um, Otherwise, they don't seem like the same thing at all. They have no relationship to each other.
Right.
So that's the thing that we talk about all the time, is like, this is how we saw He-Man when we were kids.
Yeah,
Revelation is exactly how we played with the toys when we were kids.
definitely.
I mean, certainly me and the other writers, and Teddy Biaselli and Rob David. I mean, this is how we played with the toys. I mean, that's the same thing for me with Transformers War for Cybertron. I mean, I was more than Masters of the Universe. I was a Transformers kid when I was a kid.
Hmm.
And the way I played with my Transformers was much more serious and dramatic than what was going on in the series. And then the movie came out, the 86 animated movie, and that movie took that stuff seriously and
It
presented
gave you a gut punch right out of the gate.
Yeah, and it presented themes that were really challenging for me as a kid that were
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
sometimes the good guys don't win, and sometimes your heroes die, and the
Yeah.
bad guys take over, and and the consequences were huge, and the stakes were real, and that was my first taste of, I think, what, like, that idea that we're talking about, of, like, taking a a thing that, you know, that maybe is not fully realized in terms of the way we play with the toys, in terms of the way our imaginations work, um, and then putting that on screen, realizing it more like the way we play with the toys. When I played
Yeah.
with Transformers as a kid, Transformers died all the time, and that, but it never happened on the show, you know. And then the movie happened, and I was like, "This is exactly what's in my head." And
Mhm.
that is magical.
Yeah. And
That's the kind of
you connect with that and you remember you make that connection, you know, with that memory. Like, okay, this is something different than what I was expecting, different than what I'm used to. And, you know, hopefully that makes it special. Like that makes it click for
well,
you,
it's if you
you
have a
know?
new relationship with it, or
Yeah. Yeah.
rediscover your relationship with it, even as a kid. I mean, you know, you know, it's like you reached inside my head and brought that to life on the screen. And so for us, that's kind of the thing we're always doing. That's what we did, and we tried to do in Masters of the Universe Revelation.
Mhm.
You know, and I say reach inside your head and pull, you know, we can't obviously do that, right? And especially with
Sure.
He-Man
Sure.
fans. I mean, there is this is a fan base that was for so long, so, for lack of a better word, deprived of scripted entertainment.
Mhm.
And but there was a lot of canon, a lot of things in all these different places, and so many fans had to work so hard to try to make a workable headcanon out of all these different things without calling it a multiverse,
Yeah.
which is kind of the easy way, you
Exactly.
know, through it. Which, by the way, there's nothing wrong with a multiverse. I work in multiverses all the time. I think probably more often than not, the multiverse is a much better avenue to take, because it allows for everything to be able to
And
be.
it gives you elbow room.
Well, it just, yes, it does. It allows for this to be true, and for this to be true, and for them not to fight with each other, you know? And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
important. But so for so long, I think the fans of He-Man were trying to make sense out of that headcanon and put all the pieces together. And there was never going to be any way that we could go in there and reach into every fan's head, who all had their own version of how things work together. And but we could reach
Sure.
into our own, and happily you had a bunch of fans working on the show who, you know, had an understanding of it, and a feeling about it, and we could use that, and hopefully it would translate to what you felt and what other fans, you know, would feel when they, you know, that, hey, that's how I feel
Right.
about it, how I always saw, you know, He-Man and Tila, and, you know, and Skeletor and Evil Lyn, and Orko, you know, that's how I always saw Orko. um I think that, I guess, if I'm going to put a fine point on it, to me, that's the privilege of doing what we do. The privilege is getting to realize these these things that we love and that so many people love, in a way that makes you fall in love with it all over again. Hopefully, like, well, hopefully it makes you rediscover your connection to it.
Yeah.
That's the privilege and the joy of it all.
Okay.
That's kind of
You know, I
vague, but
think no, no, I get what you're saying. You know, I think I guess for me the benefit of looking at this and approaching this specifically with Masters of the Universe, because I mean, obviously that's where my main fandom lies, you know, but I see these things and when Revelation was first announced, it came with the idea that this was going to be a continuation of the classic era of He-Man, right? And so to my mind, I immediately jumped to, okay, if this is a continuation, I want to see certain plot points that never saw fulfillment in the older cartoons. I want to see them play out. You know, I've read them in the comics. I know what the storyline is. I know what the canon is, but it's a little bit more special to see it play out on screen, to see it animated, to have the characters talking through these plot points, you know. And I think for me, I won't speak for everybody, but for me, that was what was exciting. And so I went into Revelation expecting certain events to take place. And I got what I wanted, you know, I was satisfied with it, but it also challenged me because we, like you said earlier, you know, you get to see your heroes challenged. You know, you see He-Man dies, what happens next? You know, you see Tila at her low point, at her breaking point, what happens next? You know, what makes these characters heroes, you know? And in order to see that, they have to be challenged. They have to come up against something that's tough.
And like you
And
said, it's not.
that's fun.
Yeah, it is. It's not like these things haven't, like you said, been explored in comics
Hmm.
or even, you know, with the action figures in your own living room. I mean,
Yeah.
these are things that have been explored already. But we, you know, but the thing about this is why we'll watch a Batman origin over and over and over again. You know, this is something that historically throughout time we do. Storytellers, new storytellers come along and retell old stories and ancient stories, and you know, where they put a new spin and they have maybe a little bit of different perspective on it. But we kind of were familiar with the story. We know, and this is the case for, you know, an origin story for He-Man, or if you're familiar with the canon about, you know, sort of where these characters are going sort of in the general canon sphere
Hmm.
of Masters of the Universe. That's it's like getting to just jump up. This is why I love saying, like, with Lord of sorry, with Long Halloween, how it's just how it played out in our corner of the multiverse, the movie.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
book, it plays out a little differently, and
Sure.
somebody else makes it and puts it in a movie or a show or something, it's going to play out a little differently there. And we can all, just like the way the Berlanti verse exists and the Snyder verse exists, and
Hmm.
all these things can be, they can all exist, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
um
Sometimes they're connected, sometimes they're one-off, sometimes they're what if stories, you know, but
Sometimes,
it's all adding to the richness of these characters and
and that's it.
this world.
It's the characters. The
Yeah.
characters at the core are the sort of constant. You know,
Hmm.
we get to sort of hear them to speak a little bit differently, get to see them a little bit different every time because there's new creative energy behind it. And everybody kind of, we all get a chance to come in and add a little bit of our voice into these characters and hopefully illuminate a new angle on them that maybe you hadn't considered before, or maybe you had and you were really craving, you know, seeing something like that. That's a lot like, you know, for me, I did a movie called Man of Tomorrow that was a Superman story, and it wasn't, it was very subtle in what I was writing, but for me, it's important to write from your own experience. You have to be
Hmm.
honest. People respond to real, honest storytelling when you tell the truth. And for me, that story about a guy who is, you know, kind of, it's in many ways, people look at it as an immigrant story. I tried to look at it from the perspective of what it was like to be different from everybody else around you, and and but to look just like them
Yeah.
and to blend in, but feel that every day that you're essentially being dishonest with everyone because you haven't been who you are with them. They don't know who you really are. It
Yeah.
really could be a double secret in Secret Identity.
Hmm.
And and so for me, I had the experience of growing up as a closeted gay kid in Florida in the 90s. And that, you know, was sort of what informed how I wrote Kal-El's story in that movie of being somebody who was hiding in plain sight, afraid for his life and for the lives of the people he loved.
Yeah.
Um, if people knew who he really was.
Right.
So, so that's how I got to lend a little bit of my voice to the great canon that is Superman. Now, it didn't Superman's not gay in the movie. It's not about
Right,
that
right.
at all. It's a feeling that I think can bring people together, because there's people who feel that way. There are immigrants who feel that way. There are people, LGBTQIA plus people who feel that way. There are men and women who feel that way. People of every stripe have had that kind of similar base feeling, whatever the circumstances are around it.
Sure, sure.
Um,
And that creates a way for people to connect with themes.
yeah,
You know what I mean? And
yeah,
like you said, it's not you're not writing a story where Superman is gay. You're
no,
creating this
it's not.
character where many different people can approach it and see themselves in their heroes,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
And
what
that's
it is,
important.
that's what you're doing. But as a writer, people will only respond to something if it's honest.
Yeah.
If it's rooted in something real. And so it's a little bit of a magic trick, because since the story is not about my story, being
Hmm.
the gay kid in Florida, it's about Kal-El's story, being a space alien with superpowers on Earth, and also from Kansas. Um, but the magic trick is that there is a place very deep, in the story, way back, out of view, where those things are kind of the same.
Yeah.
And that's that thing where that core of the story is what everybody has their own version of, and that's how we relate to things, and that's how we all not only relate to a story, but then hopefully, and not that this is our mission, but I think great art does this, hopefully then we all relate to each other in a
Yes.
in a better way, and in a more honest way, and in a happier way. Um,
Yeah.
I think there's been great art that has done that. And I think we don't set out to bring people together necessarily, but I think there's always an opportunity to do that. So then you had Masters of the Universe Revelation, which really divided people a little bit, I think.
Yeah. That was wild.
Oh man, I'm going to talk about that for just a second, which is to say
Okay.
this. I I'm glad. I'm actually kind of glad that we got to go through all that, because I
Yeah.
kind of went through a similar thing again at DC Comics, and I had been kind of through it a little bit, and now I feel a lot stronger having dealt with it. But I think real fans, are are going to be they're just so much smarter now and savvier now, having all of us gone through that, um
Hmm.
that they know, I think, how to spot a bad actor, a dishonest YouTuber, when
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
they see it. And look, people got to make money. Good for them. They got people to click on their videos. Good. It's unfortunate that they had to be dishonest or disingenuous to do it, but um, you know, buyer beware. Like, we all have to be careful about the sources, where
Yeah.
we're hearing stuff, and what we're not only taking in, but then what we're putting back out. I maintain that there's a whole contingent of people who just got into an echo chamber, who never saw the show, who
Sure.
never knew anything about the show, but were just repeating what they heard a person who they follow on a social platform say. and
Yeah. Yeah.
and that kind of thing just echoes and echoes and echoes, and it can be poisonous, and it can be but more than anything, it was just kind of annoying,
Yeah.
because it didn't
Well,
hurt
and
anything. In fact, it probably brought more people to the show, which is good. But it's annoying, because
it's
your
kind of one
life
of those things
is
where
good. Add one more piece of that. It was annoying for
sure.
me because I love the people who I worked for on that first series. I mean,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
absolutely love Rob David, Teddy Biaselli, and my God, do I love Kevin Smith. They are incredible human beings who came at this thing with such love, such a huge, you know, uh, uh, desire to make something that was a love letter, and so to see them dragged a little bit was was just the worst thing for me. Like, I just wanted to get in there and, but you can't. But I just wanted to
Yeah,
defend not myself so much as my friends.
sure. And I think that's what's frustrating, because as a fan myself, I I want to be mature about things.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's going to be stuff that I don't like. Does it mean that I have to go drag creators through the mud because I didn't personally like something? I don't know. That seems, I mean, to me, that's a very childish approach to
Oh,
take. You
yeah.
know, I can be disappointed. I'm allowed that. Everybody's allowed that. But we don't have to be jerks about stuff.
But you know what? I'm going to say one more thing, and this is the last thing I'm going to say, which is
Okay.
there's also people being jerks about something that they didn't understand. And
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
sorry that, like you didn't get it, and that's okay. It went over your head, and that's okay. Sometimes that happens. But
Hmm.
when other people point out to you, oh, you didn't catch what was going on. This is what this was about.
Yeah.
And they just dig in. It's like, oh no, you have to know when you've misinterpreted something and you didn't
Sure.
if you're being an honest dealer, you say,
Yes.
oh, I didn't get that when I saw it. Maybe it was just me, maybe it was the storytelling, I don't know. But if a
Yeah.
million other people saw it that way, then maybe I was wrong and I'll have to look at it again. Like that's a
Sure.
mature way of coming back on something like that. Instead what we see is people just digging in when they completely missed something, which in some cases was their own fault. Let's be honest.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes,
All right. Well,
sometimes, not everybody. Sometimes.
not everybody. Well, I think we can
You
move on
have,
from that.
I can tell you have so many opinions about all this stuff, but we can leave any of that for another day. I'm sure there'll be another project that we'll get to talk about that stuff because that's the way the world is now.
Definitely.
You know what?
That's just how it is.
You know what I heard? I listened
What?
to a podcast with Ted Sarandos, the head of Netflix. Sometimes I guess my boss. Never met the man, but I listened to a podcast with him, and he talked about how he doesn't do a lot of podcasts too. I think he was on the Smartless podcast. Sorry, I'm plugging a podcast, but it was a really good.
Oh no, you're fine.
Listen to this interview because it was fantastic, and
Okay.
he talked about the changing nature of the relationship between the viewer and a movie. And this knocked my socks off when I heard him say it. And I tell it to everybody I meet. I just like strangers on a bus. I'll be like, you have to hear what Ted Sarandos said. He said, you have to realize that when we were coming of age, to see a movie meant that you had to seek it out, find where it was playing, get to the theater, show up on time, sit quietly in your seat and pay attention and not leave unless you were okay missing stuff,
Sure.
to watch a thing that was literally bigger than life, larger than life, bigger than you in front of you. That was what the power that movies had for a long time.
Mhm.
Now, much more often, we're experiencing a movie in our living room on a screen that is smaller than the real world,
Mhm.
that we have control over with a little device. We can stop it and start it whenever we want. We can lower the volume, raise the volume. We can start at any time. We don't have to show up on time. So as the viewer, our relationship to this movie is completely lopsided now, where we're the ones in control. The movie, the story that we're watching is not controlling the situation, the relationship anymore. Now, there's
Yeah.
good and bad. There are good and bad things about that, but it's an important note, especially from the guy who made Netflix what it is.
Yeah.
To recognize that Netflix has a role in having changed people's relationship to the media they consume. Now,
Mhm.
I add to what Ted, but that concept was something, the way he illuminated it was so genius to me. And like I said, I tell it to everybody I meet because it just unlocked everything for me. The relationship we have as a viewer to the media is totally different now because we're in control of it all the time. And so the way we talk about it, the way we feel about it, the way we talk to other people, the way we interact with the creators of the thing is different because we feel like we're the ones in control of it. That's, of course, you're going to be a little more brash, a little bit more open about how you feel, because it's a thing.
Yeah.
It's not theirs, right? The movie
Yeah,
used to be in charge. Now you're in charge. The piece that I add to this is that this is the way it always was in comic books. And I think comic book fans are even further advanced in terms of their relationship to the stories that that they tell or that they read, because it's always been smaller than them. It's always been in your hands, and you could always put it down and pick it up whenever you wanted. You were in control of how you experienced the comic book story. So it was yours. And so comic book fandom developed a real sense of ownership over comic book stories and universes way before we did it with movies. And so I think if we want to see where movie audiences are heading and their relationship to the material that's put out there, we just have to look to the comic book fandom and see that's the road sign. That's where we're headed. If we, and I think they're kind of they're starting to converge. They're starting to meet, and so that's just it's not that it's good or bad. It's different and it's new and it's the way it's going to be. So get on board,
Right. Yeah. It's not changing anytime soon.
No, I mean, in fact, it's only going to keep going down that road. So,
yeah.
I think there's old guys like me who, we're like, oh, I really thought I would be working in a period where, I didn't expect to have Twitter where everybody had an opinion all the time. I thought maybe I'd have some reviews from people who, went to school to review things, but everybody always has an opinion and they always want to tell you about it. Sometimes they want to tag you in their stuff and you're like, please don't. And so, but that's it. That's I mean, we may not feel comfortable, but we have to adapt because this is the world. This is how it is. This is what it means to be a creator of entertainment nowadays.
Yeah. And that's an interesting perspective. I like that.
Well, thank you, Ted Sarandos, for opening up my eyes on that whole thing.
Yeah. I'll get that podcast from you later.
It's great.
That sounds interesting. I want to talk a little bit more about DC. We've covered Superman, we've covered Long Halloween. Let's why don't we talk about your new book? Let's talk about Flashpoint Beyond.
Oh yeah, okay, sure.
Oh,
trade paperback.
I've got my copy here.
That's the trade paperback that just came out.
Yep, there's your name, right?
That is, as far as I know, my name. Yes.
There we go. There you are. Okay, so first off, I love the cover art. I saw this and loved it. I mean, Thomas Wayne Batman is insane.
Yeah, Mitch Gerrits is I don't know. I don't know that I'm pronouncing his name right. I've only met him once. He's the sweetest guy and he's a brilliant artist. We were so lucky to get him for those covers.
Yeah, that's awesome. What I guess my biggest question for this is this, if we're going with the multiverse thing that we've kind of been talking a little bit about, is this considered a sequel to the original Flashpoint event, or is this is a sequel? Okay.
Yeah.
I was curious.
This is the official sequel to Flashpoint. Yeah.
Okay. That's what I thought. But then the more I kind of thought about it, I was like, well, maybe it's a what if story. Those happen too, but it felt like a sequel.
Well, it's funny.
It references things that happened.
Yeah. But I mean, Flashpoint always kind of walked that line, didn't it? Of like,
yes,
it read like a what if story, but it impacted the DC universe. That was kind of that's kind of the mandate for us, like going in. We're like, well, we could just do a story that's completely, in its own section of the canon that doesn't impact anything else. But fans, to be frank, don't really want those stories. I mean, I think everybody, they're more fans want stories that are impactful to the entire universe of like in this case DC, or in other
Mhm.
cases Marvel or other places. And so for that was a bit of a challenge, was to sort of figure out like how is this going to have repercussions throughout the DC canon.
Yeah.
Happily, we had Jeff Johns there, the creator of so many amazing things, including the original Flashpoint. And
Yes.
Jeff, had, Jeff, you say hello to Jeff, and before he says hello back, he has about 50 ideas like that just popped into his. He's got lots of and big like stuff that full of heart and things that tie things to other things, and he's got such a Rolodex of the DC history in his brain at all times that it's very it's a real comfort to have him there, helping hold my hand through obscure references that I'm like, wait, this is even too much for me, like, figure out what this means. Jeremy Adams is also, has a really he's got a really good rooting in DC lore, and sometimes him and Jeff would just start bantering about something that I would kind of know, but not on the level that they did. And
Yeah.
and so it became a joke that like it's like, oh well, Tim doesn't know anything about DC. I'm like, wait a minute, hang on. Just because you guys are the uber nerds who know things about DC doesn't mean I don't. But boy, we had such a blast. We had such a blast working on that. I
It's a fun
I
story.
didn't
I
know
really enjoyed it.
before that. I knew Jeremy. Jeremy and I came up together in animation and kind of started in comics at the same time as well. And Jeremy is like a brother to me. I mean, we talk every day on the phone. We have for years, and we didn't expect that we were going to do a thing like this together, but we started
Yeah.
talking. To DC wanted to do a thing, and we had some ideas that we started pitching. But one of the ideas started as something different and then evolved into where, like, one day I said, wouldn't it make more sense if this was connected to Flashpoint? And we all thought about it, and we were like, oh yeah, it would. This would make more sense. And I said, well, I'm not going to touch Flashpoint without calling Jeff, who I didn't know, but I said we better get him on the phone and find out if it's
Yeah.
something. Like, I don't want to step on his thing. Like, I don't want to,
Sure.
you know and we didn't have much of an idea, by the way. It was like just a vague sort of thing. And and then Jeff came in and said, not only do I want to do I want you to do this, but or want you to do a sequel to Flashpoint, but I want to work with you on it. And we were just like, Jeremy and I were just like, are you kidding? Because to us it was like, this is an opportunity to basically get a master class in comic book writing of the
Yeah.
last couple of decades, if not, you know, throughout history, because he kind of knows everything about that too. Um, and by the way, that's exactly what it ended up being. Was just a constant, wonderful for us masterclass. He never treated it that way. Like, he always treated us like equals. And we're like, we're not your equal. Would you stop talking to us like we're equals? You created Flashpoint. But that was the minute that he said he was going to do it. And then, by the way, we all got together, and the little piddly idea that Jeremy and I had, we threw that out the first day. It was out the door, and we came up with a whole new thing together, the three of us. And that's what
Awesome.
the story is that exists now. It doesn't have any relationship to the thing that Jeremy and I were talking about that started the process. But happily, I'm glad we had that kicking around, and that it opened a door to Jeff, because out of that, if I think the best thing that's come out of that process for me was not only getting to work with my friend Jeremy, but also getting to become friends with Jeff, because I just he he reminds me in so many ways of Kevin Smith. I don't think people understand how kind and generous he can be, and he was a real joy just to hang out with, on that book. And since then, I mean, we will get together and get lunch and hang out, and he's just like a guy that you would have hung out with in high school. Talk about comic books.
Yeah, yeah. That's awesome. And that's what you get to see people who are passionate about their craft, right? And that's where I
Yeah,
mean
he
that's why
doesn't. By the
fans
way,
connect
he
with
doesn't
it.
have to do comics. That guy,
Yeah.
he doesn't have to do comics. He's he's got he's got a film and TV career that is going great, but he does comics because he does DC comics because he loves
Yeah.
it so much. He just loves it. He gets excited about it. Like, it's to the point where when two schmoes who he doesn't know come to him and are like, "Hey, we're thinking about doing a sequel to Flashpoint." Anybody else would be like, "Get the hell out of my office,"
Yeah, yeah.
And he's like, "Yeah, and I want to do it too." That's that's the magic of that guy.
Oh, that's fun. That's that's pretty great. Um, so I guess with, I it's still a fairly new book, so I don't know if I want to spoil too much about what happens because I still want people to be able to enjoy it for themselves.
Sure, we don't have to
Um,
get into spoilers, but
yeah, yeah,
about sort of the themes and what we were trying to do.
yeah. I really liked seeing Thomas Wayne, his Batman. He's always portrayed as the violent Batman, the Batman who uses guns and does things that Bruce doesn't do. He doesn't have a line, he's very willing to cross that line and he does over and over again. I think what I really liked about this book is we get to see this hard-nosed character kind of change a little bit as things progress, and it was the moment where it happens, I'm not going to reveal that, but the moment where it happens was a pretty cool moment and my jaw kind of dropped, you know.
I mean,
It was a good moment.
thank you. That was the thing, I mean, what you identified there, that was the whole thing. We we wanted to see. Take a step back. By the way, I put in a lozenge. I'm sorry. I just didn't want my
No, you're fine.
hacking coughing or something if I didn't have some kind of moisture. Um, uh, we started talking about Flashpoint when we first got together, and about how the original Flashpoint is basically a study in grief.
Yeah.
You know, and we get to see a lot of sides of that, but two in particular, which are Barry Allen's grief over his mother,
Hmm.
and not just his mother, but the world and what's happened because of it. What's happened with his mother. He's a man in absolute grief. We also meet Thomas Wayne, who is um, a man who lives every day with grief, and it's not unlike Bruce Wayne, but we kind of got used to Bruce Wayne,
Yeah.
having that, and it's a completely different thing. I would argue the grief of a child who lost his parents to a, a, a guy who lost his wife and child.
Yeah.
Um, I think there is especially his child, there's something different about a parent losing a child, I think, than a child. Not that one is bigger, or,
No, no, no.
but,
Grief is
but
grief.
they're different. They're just different
Yeah.
in a lot of ways. Same in a lot of ways too, but I think there are differences, and that was a really interesting and exciting thing about that original book. But when we sat down to talk about it, we talked a little bit more about the concept of grief, and what what does it mean to live with grief, or like in Flashpoint, to try to eradicate your grief, to
Hmm.
correct, mistakes, and to have the ability to go back and change things so that you could not have to live with that grief.
Yeah.
That's one, the eradication of it is one way of dealing with it. I would say it's a way that you can deal with it in the movies and in comics, but in real life, we don't necessarily have the option of going back in time and making a different choice and changing things.
Yeah.
Um, so there's a real practical question of how do we move beyond grief? How do we somehow move on and get beyond it and not eradicate it, but learn to make friends with it and live with it? And that became the sort of central core for us, for Thomas Wayne in this story,
Yeah.
and Bruce as well, who comes at it a very
Yes.
different way. Um, that
Hmm.
may or may not be a good way, Um, but we do see Thomas confront his grief in a different way than we've ever seen, and
Yeah.
and move beyond it. Whether, and spoiler
Hmm.
alert, but it's right there in the title. So, um,
Yes.
uh, and whether that's good or bad, who's to say? But he finds a way to move beyond it. Um, it may not be the way he thought it when he started this story. 6 issues later, it might not be the same way of moving
Yeah.
beyond. Um, but that's what we aimed for. You know.
Yeah.
And,
And I
and by
think
the
the
way,
important
this
part of
isn't to
that
say
is,
this isn't to say that this isn't a fun superhero action story with lots of cool set
right.
pieces and, like, it's got all of that fun stuff. But at its core, when we sat down, Jeff in particular was just really, and this is the way I write and the way I think all the time, is like, what is the heart of this? Like, we don't have to talk about it even, but like, we have to know what is the heart of this thing. And then once we know that, then we can write all the fun set pieces around all that, and
Yeah.
still communicate that essence of what the heart of it is. Which
Yeah.
I hope we did.
And I think that's what's fun about this story, and stories that do this is we see the growth of characters, right? We get to see them change. Sometimes it's for the better, hopefully it's for the better, sometimes it's for the worse, but I think seeing characters change over the course of a story, seeing them developed, that I think that's what's interesting. And kind of like what you were saying, I've talked about this with other people, but I've realized, the older I get as a father, as a husband, I still I like the big action set pieces, obviously, like, but I find myself gravitating towards the human interactions, and the human relationships, and to see how those are affected
Mhm.
with these characters, you know. And when I came to terms with that for myself, it kind of unlocked something for me to where I like seeing that. I can appreciate those emotions more, and it feels like I'm learning something from it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, and I think that is where Jeff, is now in his life versus where he was when he wrote the first story. He's a father now, and he's talking about fathers and sons,
Hmm.
and that's the thing. Thomas Wayne was supposed to be a dad,
Yeah.
you know, and he in this story, like, his goal is to go back and be a dad, right? um and how the story is resolved.
Right.
um it's hopefully a little surprising the way that he's able to resolve that
Yeah.
for himself.
Yep.
Mm, but there is resolution.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was unexpected resolution considering the character.
Mhm.
I didn't expect it to play that way, but I was pleasantly surprised by it, and I really enjoyed it. So
There's
good work.
I know. So I wish we could talk about some of the specifics. I don't want to spoil
Yeah,
anything.
yeah,
There's the way in which the resolution is met is via a sort of reintroduction of a character we have in this story, a couple of them, um, who one of them has always been classically a balancing force of light and good, and classically in comics, and um, it's almost like people were surprised when a little bit. Some people were surprised. They were like, "Oh, that's what this character is. This character," and it's like, how did you? I don't know. I mean, to me, I'm so glad we fooled them because uh, to me, it always had to go. It always had to end there
yeah,
because that's what Batman needs. At least this
yep,
Batman.
yeah, yeah. It was good. Good job. um,
On behalf of my fellow creators, by the way, Mike, Mikkel, Henin, and oh my goodness, Hermanico, the artists on that book.
there is some beautiful art.
Yeah, Zermanico would turn in pages, and I would just be on the floor. I just couldn't believe what he was he's so smart, and he's such a good storyteller, and he's asking us questions when he's looking at the script, and he wants to talk about this beat and what this means, and maybe if I do this, it'll communicate that better. And I was like, oh my god, it's like it was a real partnership, and it was joy to work with those guys.
That's cool. So, you've worked with Superman, you've worked with Batman as a
I
character.
worked with those
Have
guys.
you?
They're coworkers of mine.
Yeah, yeah.
And then Super.
Um, I mean, have you ever gotten to write specifically and completely focused for Wonder Woman, or is that something that you
No,
hope to be able to do?
I
You got to
worked.
complete the Trinity, right?
Well, I'll tell you this. I don't know if I've spoken about this in public. Maybe I did. I worked on a. We were working on a. It was really I guess it was a pitch. We didn't have a green light yet, but at Warner Brothers, we Butch Lukic, who's a producer over there, who I had worked with on Justice League Action, and he's the guy who he and Jim Krieg, who I worked for on JLA, hired me to do The Long Halloween and Man of Tomorrow, which Butch was
Okay.
producing. And before Butch was slated to do Long Halloween, he was looking sort of to pitch a new project, and we were we were working out a pitch for a Wonder Woman series that was if anybody ever digs it up and we get to do it, oh god, I loved it. I love it. It's a for me, it'll be a really fun Wonder Woman show, and I would love to be a part of it. But it everything kind of got moved around when
Hmm.
Butch was put in charge of the new DC Movies initiative, and so that went by the wayside. But that was something I was hoping to complete the Trinity, the DC
Yeah,
Trinity
yeah.
back then even. Um, but no, that didn't come to pass. Maybe someday.
Ah, well, hopefully that would be fun.
I had a well, I've had a lot of you know working at DC. I had the opportunity on Titans Academy to sort of create a whole new generation of characters that were the freshman class at this school, and I really wanted to kind of deal and work in the world of the Amazons, but there was a lot of stuff going on with the Amazons at the time in the comics, and that was other people's territory, and so it was not something that I was able to get in on. But
Ah, dang.
I'm such a big fan, and I'd love to get to play in that world one day. Very jealous of my friend Jeff, who gets to write Wonder Woman for the big screen, but
Oh,
that's neither here nor there.
yeah. Well, hopefully one day I'll be rooting for you.
Yeah, one day, one day.
Um, I I think that's all the questions I have about DC. I want to talk about
Good.
another project that you just good. Let's talk about Dragon Age. Can we talk about
Ah,
Dragon Age?
did you watch it?
It's out. I watched it. I liked it. I was
Yeah,
in.
yeah. Thanks.
I'm
It's
I'm getting
that's a
I'm get, I'm
great
getting I'm getting kind of tired of cliffhanger endings.
show.
But that's the nature of the beast, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I started playing these games back when Dragon Age, when the first game came out, Origins, Dragon Age Origins, is when my first son was born.
Wait, was
I was still
Origins the
in.
first game?
It's the
I thought
first
it
one that
came
I played.
later. It was like a prequel. I thought, but you know what? I could be wrong. I am not an expert on the gaming world. I'm not a gamer
Okay.
myself.
So and
But
my, it's not my main focus even in video games, but it's something that, I've played Origins, I've played Dragon Age 2, I've played Inquisition, and I
yeah,
enjoyed them. I've been in that world, so I don't know. It was fun. I haven't played the games for a few years since I finished playing Inquisition, completed that game. So it's been a while, but just being able
yeah.
to jump back into that world with the series was really.
Me too.
I'd kind of forgotten how much I enjoyed that world. You
It-
start hearing all the words that they use, all the terminologies and things like that. It
yeah,
threw me right back in it, and I think that's I think that's good on you guys for being able to do that.
I'm a few years out from the games as well because we wrote it a few years ago. So,
Mm.
that's the way animation. So,
Yeah.
but I actually, when I say I didn't really play. I sat with my
Okay.
husband. He played Inquisition, and I.
Gotcha.
This is what I love to do. I'm sorry, but I'm just going to. I'm going to tell the world. I'm not a. I'm not really a video game player person. I am a video game spouse. I love sitting on the couch and being a part of it, but not having to control it, you know, and getting to like help solve puzzles and make decisions and go like get into the world, but not have to have the controls in my hand. Part of that has to do with when I was a kid, I never got a Nintendo. All I ever had was an
Gotcha.
Atari when I was a kid, which was a joystick. A
Yep.
joystick is not a Nintendo style controller, so I never really learned how to like. I never developed a relationship with this kind of controller. It's just never
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah.
A little bit on Dr. Mario, but that's it. Um, but anyway, so yeah, so we listen that show there. If you enjoyed that show, or if you didn't enjoy that show, but it is it is not it doesn't have much to do with me. I was hired by a friend who wow, this is so funny because I met Margaret Scott. I knew who Margaret Scott was because I read Transformers comics and watched Transformers Prime and GI Joe Renegades. I knew Margaret's name because it's a really easy name to remember. Margaret is
Yeah.
not a name you see very often.
Right.
And so Margaret's shadow loomed large for me because she had worked on these things that I'm like crazy about. At the
Yeah.
time, I hadn't worked on Transformers or GI Joe or anything like that. And I met her when I was in an office at Warner Brothers working with Butch Lukic and Jim Krieg on that on that Wonder Woman pitch that I was just talking to you about.
Okay. Okay.
And
How's that for a segue?
I know, and I pitched it First time I ever pitched it was to Margaret, who I
Yeah.
just met. Like they're like, Margaret Scott. This is Tim Sheridan. This is Margaret Scott. And I'm like, oh, I am a fan. And so she heard my pitch, and let me preface this by saying I am crazy about Margaret Scott. I'm crazy about her. She was like, ooh, no. Like, not how I would do it. See you later. uh, I thought this was really good, and I talked to her a little bit about it later. By the way, the thing she was right about everything, um, but uh, but we became friends, um, and we kind of we were always sort of circling each other, doing sort of similar jobs around each other, but never worked together. And then
Mhm.
she had an opportunity. She was hired as the showrunner on DragonAge because of her
Yeah.
extensive knowledge of DragonAge and being a player and fan of the games, and being a well-established animation writer. And she was the only person who could do that job. They were
Yeah.
very lucky to get her. And I was very lucky that when they told her that she could staff up with two staff writers, that she called me, and she called May Cat, who I had just met and worked with on Transformers War for Cybertron Kingdom. May and I wrote Kingdom together. And it was the first
Yeah.
it was sort of an arranged marriage. We just were thrown in a room together as total strangers, and we wrote this thing. And May had this huge, extensive love of and understanding of Beast Wars, which was incredibly helpful for Kingdom. I was a G1 guy, but since Kingdom was a mashup of G1 and Beast Wars, we were kind of the
That's
perfect
perfect.
team to
Yeah.
do it. So we had a great time on that. And then I found out after I took the job on Dragon Age that May was going to be the other writer. I said, "Are you kidding me? This is
Oh,
great." And
that's
it was
awesome.
right after I wrapped Revelation. I worked on War for Cybertron. I went right into Revelation, and then right into Dragon Age for Netflix. So three in
Okay.
a row. Um, and Margaret Scott is the reason why that show works, and why, as a Dragon Age fan, you watch it and go, "Oh, this is Dragon Age," um,
Mhm.
uh, because she is relentless about about getting it right. She and she knows she's confident about what she knows is the right way to tell the story. And um and and
Yeah.
everything else sort of, she's a great producer, and everything falls into place under her vision. And all I had to do was show up, listen to Margaret, learn from Margaret, write stuff for Margaret, break story together. And my role often when I work with a lot of people, particularly if it's welcome, with Margaret in particular, she welcomes it, is to sort of find if there are any gaps and holes in the story, and what, this might not make sense because we didn't set up this. And I'm looking at it from a different angle than she's looking at it from. Sometimes I'm kind of looking at it
Yeah.
from the couch as a viewer, and she's looking at it as the producer looking over the whole thing. And so she valued that and values that. So it was a great working relationship. So I got to do that in the room, and then she, sent me the script on a couple of scripts, and I got to script those, and give her as much good material as she could have to sort of then work with, as the story editor slash showrunner, head writer, and make
Yeah.
that show. So it's I, I would love to take all credit for a show that you enjoy, but there's no taking more credit on that one than the boss herself, Margaret Scott, who is just an amazing talent. So I was privileged to
That's
get to work.
awesome. Well, cool. Uh, so I guess I was gonna ask what your favorite character class is when you play the game.
Well,
So I guess I'll
well,
ask you what's your husband's character class?
um, he's a a rogue of some kind. What do they call them in that game? I don't even remember. I think it's a rogue. Isn't
Yeah,
that what you
rogues,
start out
rogues.
as?
Yeah,
Yeah, he's a rogue, I think, when you
yeah,
play.
yeah.
Um, but I wanted him to be an elf of some kind, but um, uh, I, uh, I think in the show, I think I'm, I'm fascinated by uh, uh, you know, magisters and mages, and particularly the uh, the structure and the ceremony that goes into all that. I think the divine was a very interesting
Yeah, yeah,
concept for me. It's so has such a parallel to the Catholic Church, and
yes.
the kind of the Pope character, and um, I but with a health in that game, with a healthy dose of corruption, and which is very
Mhm.
historically very much like a lot of religious structure in the world. So anyway,
Yeah.
I'm sort of I get excited about that stuff, but I think in terms of our show, the 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 most the character who was the most fun to write was the Kossith mage, Quidian, who we had a great
Yeah.
time with. And, a lot of people identify Quidian uh, as Kunari, because I think a lot of people confuse Kossith with Kunari, but because Kunari is a religious order, really, although most all Kunari
Mhm.
are Kossith, um, but not always. And in this
Right.
situation, there's kind of just looking at Quidian, Quidian can't be Kunari because she doesn't adhere to
Yeah.
the strict sort of rules of that structure. Anyway, we've lost everyone who doesn't know anything about DragonAge right now. Uh, we've gotten into grand
They're
on
gone. They've left.
characters. Yeah, but they're gone. They've left it completely. I love a character like that. I love a character who is excited and fun and full of energy and ready to jump in, and is different than everybody else, looks different than everybody else, but you'd never know that they were different because they're just a kid at heart. I think
Mhm.
that's what Quigley was like. So I love
Yeah.
writing that kind of.
Well, and I think what made her work so well also is the voice actress. I mean,
Oh my God, Ashley
she's
Birch. Yeah,
she's a
yeah.
staple in the video yeah, she's a staple in the video game community. I mean, she's done so many roles. She's done contributed so much just to her earlier
The-
YouTube channels and sketch shows and things like that, and she brings that great energy to all of the characters she portrays.
not
Like,
to not to
it's
take
great.
away anything,
So
not to take
she
away
was a
from Ashley, but the that whole cast, it was an
mhm,
embarrassment of riches. They're they are the best at what they do. They're really good. I can't believe we got
yeah,
Josh Keaton,
they were fun.
who I got to work with on Justice League Action. He played Hal Jordan on that show. That
Mhm.
guy, I mean, he's Spider-Man. Like Josh Keaton he's
Yeah,
he can do everything. He can do everything. He's great to work with.
nice.
But so is
Yeah,
Ashley.
I
The
think I think
whole cast is incredible.
yeah, they were good. I liked them a lot. I I think my favorite character in the show is I liked a lot of them, but I think this is gonna be very obvious once I explain it, but I liked the Knight Commander.
Mhm. Tasya?
She
Yeah.
yeah, like, she was I mean, I like her because she reminds me of Tila. I mean, it's the same
Yeah,
archetype character, the hard-nosed
totally.
soldier. Um, but she also has this moral ground, and she's constantly trying to keep, the Magister on that path and keep him from corrupting himself and going down a dark path, and just watching her struggle with that between her duty and her love for this person, you know,
It's an
it
interesting line that she's
well
expected to walk,
portrayed. Yeah.
which is she's
Mhm.
supposed to protect his life, and that on the surface, you expect that means from physical threats to his bodily, from bodily harm, and
Right.
but it's not just that. There's more to her job, and whether it's that it's the job requirement or whether it's just because of who she is and what and who what their relationship is. Um, Protecting
Hmm.
him means a whole lot more than just being a bodyguard. Um, and
Right.
yeah, I love a character like that. I was looking back at some of the scripts, and I had written some more stuff for Tasia that unfortunately for time I think got cut from the show. But that was, to me, that might have been, I wish we'd gotten a little bit more of that stuff, because I think Tasia is a cool character that I would have watched a whole show about her.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, she was great. Well, and she's in this position, she's in an antagonistic position just because she's against our protagonist, but she's not a villain.
No.
She has a very strong moral code, and you even see her beginning to question what's really going on.
Yeah, she
And
well,
I
because
that's good characterization.
her strong moral code in the series comes in conflict with her duty, which she always thought
Yeah.
they were one and the same, and she finds that they're not.
Hmm.
And that's,
Yeah.
to me, that's
Yep.
the meat of a great story. That's why I could watch a whole show with just Tasia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd agree with that. So season 2 will be the Tasia story. I'm excited.
Hopefully there will be hopefully the Netflix gods will see to it that there'll be more Dragon Age.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, I enjoyed it. It was fun. Um, with the voice actors, Miriam was portrayed by Kimberly Brooks, who also voices Tila in the CG Netflix series, if I'm not mistaken.
Is that true? I'm
I
Googling
might
right now.
have to look that up, but I tell me what you find.
Oh my goodness. I think you are right. I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's a I am very happy to see that. I did not know she voiced Tila on the CGI show. That's fantastic.
Yeah, so
She's
yeah,
so
so
good.
so I started
So
watching the show. Yeah, I started watching the show and I was like, I recognize that voice. And so I
mm,
looked up Miriam's voice actor. I was like, okay, that's Kimberly Brooks. And I was like, I think I recognize her from when I looked up Tila from the CG series, you
mhm.
know?
Like I said,
So
best in the business. There's some
that's
great
fun.
people in that cast.
Yep.
So I'm glad that it's interesting. Could you imagine if she had played Tasia? You've been like, oh, Tila and
Oh, she would have
Tasia.
been, I'd be like, okay, this makes perfect sense.
But
So
there's a lot.
and now I wrote that I go ahead.
Sorry, we got a little bit of a delay. I don't know if anyone's noticed. Um,
Yeah, we do.
there
I'm sorry.
Okay. It's probably on my end. Um, I was just gonna say that, there's a lot of Tila in Miriam too, I think. And maybe that's because of Kimberly Brooks. I
Yeah.
don't know. But while a much more tragic origin story, um, there is at her core, there's a lot about, this woman who has to, overcome the sort of some tragic stuff in her past and become who she's meant to be. I mean, that's
Yeah.
Tila.
Yep.
you know, so
That's Tila. So, and now that's my segue into our next topic. I want to talk about Master of the Universe a little bit more.
what would you like to talk about? Things I can't talk about is probably what you.
Let's let's that I mean that's exactly what I want to talk about, but I'm not going to do that too. So, okay, so you you
You can
you said
ask anything.
earlier when we started the show
I'm not necessarily going to answer, but you can
it's
ask.
what you can answer. There we go. Okay.
Listen, you can ask
Um
whatever you want. But
we'll see what answers I get. Okay, so I guess one of the questions I see a lot with Revolution is, do we have is the same writing crew, the same behind the scenes crew, the same, the cast? Do we have all the people from Revelation returning, or are there any new writers involved?
it's a excellent question. People are asking that question. That's a great question. It's a great question that will be, I'm sure revealed, at some point when Netflix wants to reveal that
At
stuff.
some point.
What I can
Okay.
tell, well, all I can tell you is that I was asked to, I can't speak for anyone else, but I was asked to come in and work on it. And I had a gap in my schedule and said, hell yes. Because Revelation was kind of a time of our lives working on that show. And I would love to see if we can't catch a little lightning in a bottle again. Um, and so that meant that I got to get back together with Kevin Smith, who I have, who's not only a wonderful, lovely friend and a wonderful man, but a genius storyteller, honestly. And so I got to
Yeah.
work with him and the producers, on on bringing it to life. Teddy Biaselli, obviously, um,
Hmm.
and Rob David at Mattel. It's a, I don't want to speak for anyone else, but there's certainly there are pieces. Every name I just mentioned came from Revelation. So
Cool. I like it. Um, the other I saw, I posted it on Twitter, but there was an interview with Chris Wood, who is the voice actor for HeMan, and he mentioned in that interview that Revolution would be coming out sometime this year. Is that something that I mean, I
like
trust HeMan,
2023.
but since I have you, yeah,
Um,
yeah. In the
by the way,
it was an offhand comp. It was
I trust you, but I would like to verify.
let's fact check HeMan.
Well, look, I will. I don't know anything about that. Let me just say right now,
Okay.
I have no idea. I'm not on the show currently. I'm a writer and consulting producer on Masters of the Universe Revolution, but I that does not mean that I'm in the loop on the production schedule and the release schedule or anything like that.
Sure, sure.
But let me just speak generally in terms of my experience in Hollywood. You should absolutely. Chris Wood, by the way, is not only an incredible actor, but a heck of a guy. And I think I would, I want to believe everything he says, So I want to be, I want to stand with you. I would just caution you and say this: actors, they like writers, they do their in animation. We all do our job at the very beginning of the process. The actors will come back and do some
Hmm.
additional dialogue recording later on. Um, but we're done, and then it goes to the geniuses at the animation house and studio, and they create the show, and and they're not necessarily, even if you're the star of the show, you're not necessarily privy to
Sure.
details like that. So while he may he may know something I don't, and he might he might also like have been given a piece of information. That's true. That could be great. It doesn't mean that's the way it's going to play out. That's all I'm going to say. Like,
Right, right.
just because, even
Fair enough.
if I said to you right now, yes, it's coming out on this date, this time, the show is in production right now, which means
Hmm.
all of that is in flux and up in the air.
Sure.
Nobody not even the people at the highest echelons can tell you with complete certainty when it's going to come out. And I bet
Right.
if somebody followed up with Chris Wood, he would have said that. He'd say, "That's my understanding is the hope of but you can't. We're in production. You can't know for sure until it's announced.
Till it's
And
out. Yeah.
when
Till
it's
they
announced, then we'll
officially.
know. Then we'll know. It wouldn't surprise me if it's later than that, though. It really wouldn't.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's
Just
the I mean,
because I know what this season is. I know what's happening and what the demands are on the animators and
mhm,
everyone involved, and it's big and it's epic. and and it's animation done right can take some time. Good storytelling can take some time. So it wouldn't surprise me if it's later, but it also wouldn't surprise me if he's right. If it comes out this year, it wouldn't
yeah,
surprise me because we've got
fair enough.
one of the best teams in showbiz working hard to make it happen.
Mhm.
So we'll see. The announcement will come out and we'll see. Um, but as of this moment, I don't know. It could be, could not be.
Well, I think
And by the way, I'm not just being
I don't
coy.
know.
I'm
I
being
don't
a
know.
little coy. I'm being a little coy, but I'm not just being coy. Like it's true that nobody can really say right now at this moment.
Sure, sure. Well, I don't know animation. I don't know all the process that goes into it, but I do know enough to realize that it takes time. And I think, going back to part 1 and part 2 of Revelation, it was ridiculously silly to me to hear people spouting, oh, talking the nonsense about how the 4 months in between part 1 and part 2 was because they were going back and
Oh,
remaking everything because people didn't like part 1. I
yeah,
I
that's
know
just
enough to
people who
know
don't
that
understand.
was nonsense. Yeah,
People who don't understand how the business works or how animation works or anything. And I mean,
exactly.
like there was the reason why there was a gap I think was because it was for the storytelling. It was the episode 5 ended on a big cliffhanger, and
Mhm.
if it rolled into episode 6 immediately, it would have lessened the impact of the cliffhanger a bit. At least that's, I think,
Yeah,
how it was
yeah,
designed. I don't who knows if it's successful, but that's, I think, what we were designing. Um, and so, we built that into the schedule, but the whole show was done
yeah,
when
yeah.
when it was coming out, the when it premiered, I think the only thing that they were still working on was I think even Bear had finished scoring the whole thing at that point. I think, like, by the time
Yeah,
the first 5 dropped, I think all 10 were scored. I might be wrong about that, but because typically that's one of the last things that happens. But what they were doing was, like, localization at that point, which is where
okay,
they record the actors who translate into other languages and play the characters in other countries because they speak the
right.
local language. Like, that's the kind
Yeah,
of stuff that was happening on the back 5 episodes at that point. There was no
yeah.
rewriting of the story and 4 months to get new shots into the story, which is never, like, ask any animator or anybody who works in animation. They're like, "Oh, really? 4 months to get brand new stuff
Yeah,
changed based on the whims of, people, the audience, and then, try to get that into the show and make changes." No, that's a fantasy land. It's not how it works.
exactly.
Yeah. It'd be cool.
Um,
It'd be cool if that's how it worked, but,
yeah, that'd be great if we could get it that fast. Yeah.
alas.
Um, you also you wrote for the prequel comics as well. Uh, how was that experience?
Oh my god.
You obviously have experience working with comics and stuff like that. Is it fun? Is it fun writing those tie-in materials?
Let me tell you something. This I started working at DC Comics, writing some stuff for DC, and before anything I had ever written made it out into the world on comic book stores, I got the call from Kevin and Rob to help out on the prequel comics. They didn't even know I
Oh,
was
that's
at
awesome.
DC. They had no idea that I was at DC when Rob called me, and I said, I'm writing Titans right now." He's like, "What?" I said, "Well, it hasn't come. It's not coming out until May or whatever." And I'm writing these other things before that'll come out, and um, and so it was kind of a weird coincidence. It was great. It was great. One of the things that was really great was, well, great for me, maybe not for the readers, we'll see. But what was great for me was DC, my editor at DC at the time, didn't had said something to me that I took really seriously, and I think I just assumed was a rule that I had to follow, and maybe it was and maybe it wasn't. But he said something that made me believe that I was not allowed to write omniscient narrator voice captions, like,
Hmm.
in boxes to like help tell the story. And I was like, "Are you kidding? I have to do
Yeah.
everything in dialogue?" And that was kind of the rule for me, I thought. And maybe I might have misunderstood. I don't know. We've never actually resolved that. But that was what I thought the rule was. So at DC, I'm reading this book and I'm like, God, if I could only write omniscient narrator captions here, that would help
Hmm.
me turn the page and make sense out of this. And um, and then I got to do this comic book series with Rob and Kevin, these 4 issues for the Revelation prequel for Dark Horse. And there was no such uh, rule applied to this story. So I was like, well, okay, if I'm going to write an omniscient narrator voice, I want it to sound to me like the great big epic narrator voice of Silver Age, like really big, huge sounding, booming narrator voice with
Yeah.
all Shakespearean in his delivery, and make it sound special, like it's really important, as if it's literature, you know, and uh, and so that's what I ended up doing. I wrote this narrator who is very present in the first issue, and then I kind of got tired of him, and he's not in so much of the next couple. He comes back in the 4th issue, but and is revealed in the end. Spoiler alert, to be the
Hmm.
voice of the Orlax of Primaria, who is sort
Yeah.
of the central character in the story, which is ultimately, by the way, the reason why I got that call to work on that book, because um, I was the one who included and named the Orlax of Primaria in the show. It was in
That's
one of my
awesome.
episodes, and I love the idea of taking something that we grew up with that was maybe a background thing and giving it a whole backstory, at least giving it a name and making it sound like
Yeah.
something. And those creatures in the dungeon of Castle Grayskull, the Castle Grayskull playset, um, just always kind of
Yeah.
captured our imagination, and so that's what the Orlax of Primaria was born, and we kind of had to come up with a what the heck his deal was. And so that's why
Yeah.
I got the call. They were like, "Well, it's going to be an Orlax story," because Kevin and Rob conceived of what the 4 issues were going to be and what the story was. And they said the Orlax will
Hmm.
be central to this, and so will you write it? And I was like, "Please, I'm very happy to revisit the life of my old friend, the Orlax of Primaria."
Yeah.
So that
Oh,
was
that's great.
and I was very pleased to see he's still going strong. I've seen him on I saw him on a cover of something recently.
Yeah. So they're coming out with the new Tim Seeley is writing a four
Oh,
issue series for
oh my God.
Masterverse.
First of all, I'm
And
so excited. Tim Seeley is not only a great writer and artist, but he is one of the nicest people in the business. and I can't wait for it. And he's written some great stuff, as you know,
Yeah.
and
Well,
so
he's written great. He's written some really great MOTU content. He wrote the Masters of the Multiverse. He wrote the
yeah,
Injustice
yeah, he's
crossover.
he's royalty. So, in fact, to the point where when they called me to do the Revelation prequel books,
Hmm.
I said yes and jumped in, and then thought, wait, is it possible that Rob dialed the wrong Tim S in his phone? Because I think I'm if you look in Rob's phone, I bet you Tim Sheridan and Tim Seeley are right next to each other. And so I'm a little concerned that maybe it was supposed to be Tim Seeley, in which case I apologize to everyone. But very glad if that's the case that they righted the ship and that he's working on the Masterverse stuff. So
So I actually that kind of leads into one of my other questions. I was going to bring up those new comics that are coming out. We've seen a few preview images, preview pages of the comic, and to my eye, it looks like whatever stories they're telling with this, it looks to be like it's a multiverse story, but set within the Revelation continuity. Is that something that you're aware of,
I would
or am
I
I?
let's get
I
Tim Seeley up.
and I might be way off base. I'm just looking at the character designs. The sorceress that they show in these preview
That would be
pages looks
really
identical to the Revelation sorceress.
that would be really cool. Let's get Tim Seeley on the blower and we can find out, but I'm sure he won't answer us either.
Okay, sounds good.
No, I don't have any knowledge of any of that stuff.
Okay.
So I don't know. I'm just sitting here a fan like everybody else, excited for those books to come out. So um
Yeah,
I don't know. I wish I had something to tell you. I hope that's true. That would be really cool.
that would be really cool.
Yeah.
That's my guess, but I don't know. I don't know anything. So,
We'll see. Here it is.
um,
It's on record.
you know,
And if you're right, then I don't know, you win something.
cool. Get a virtual high five.
Yeah.
Um, we er, this is bringing an interesting question I want to talk about. Earlier in our interview, we were talking about the multiverse and certain aspects of a multiverse that kind of anchor characters or anchor the themes in that multiverse. Tim Seeley, in his He-Man multiverse story, there's a couple of times in there, and this really stuck out to me because I love He-Man and Tila. I love their relationship. And one of the things that he talks about in that book is he says that, He-Men have a soft spot for Tilas. And when I read that, I was like, okay, I've always loved that idea, and it kind of felt like one of those anchor points for for maybe Masters of the Universe. It's that constant idea, that regardless of the multiverse, regardless of which universe, this is something that rings true.
That's really interesting. And I think that I know
And
I'm a big fan of Doctor Who, and they always Stephen Moffat in particular, when he's writing that show, would always come back to this concept of fixed points in time and things that can't be changed across timelines and across throughout time. And to me, that what you're talking about is a cousin to that idea that wherever you go through the multiverse, there are constants, certain constants, and
mhm,
that's
yeah.
one of them. Um, I can say, you know, what's cool about that, I think, is that for us, that was a was a was a was a what's the word I'm looking for? It's a marker in the sand for us. It was like when we wrote Revelation, it was with that in mind through the whole thing. The whole backbone of that story is He-Man and Tila and the relationship between them. Everything is about
Hmm.
their relationship. Everything. There's nothing that's happening in that story that is not about that. And
Yeah.
and so that is I mean, if I'm gonna give you any hints at all about, Revolution, I would simply say you would be out of your mind if you didn't think that that was still an important marker for the people who are making the show. That is a that relationship is central to the whole thing. It does for us. It doesn't exist without it. Um, and that, by the way, a relationship takes many forms, and you saw it in Revelation. The first 5 episodes, were about them being apart, maybe
Yeah.
forever.
Yeah.
And but there's
Yeah.
still a relationship. It's still the backbone of the whole thing. So
Right.
that is a central point of focus, certainly when we were making those shows. It sounds like it's a central point for Tim Seeley. I know that it is for Rob David, because he talked about it all the time in the room. We would always try to bring it back to what does this mean in terms of the relationship between Adam and Tila, or He-Man and Tila.
Yeah.
Uh,
And
and thank goodness we had him doing that. I think he's right. That I think that's the thing we can really identify with, and it's the heart. It's the heart of the whole story.
mhm. Yep. And that, it was easy for me to see that watching the show. I mean, we obviously had the weird controversial noise about what was going on with Tila, with part one when part one came out. But I mean, just you watch the show and you know these characters, and I don't know how people get to that point. I mean, there's
Yeah,
it's
I think
very
that's the thing
obvious that
too.
it's a running thing, that's what's going on.
Yeah, we didn't. We weren't reinventing anything there. I mean, that is that is completely. Uh, that's an important, like as Tim Seeley says, He-Man's, what is it? He-Man's, what did he say? He-Man's love Tilas, or
Yeah,
He-Man's are drawn to Tilas.
He-Men have a soft spot for Tilas.
He-Men have a soft
And
spot for Tilas. Boy, that's an understatement, isn't it? That's a total understatement, but an artful one.
definitely. Yes. Yeah. It was a really cool moment in those books, and he iterates on that a few times throughout the book, and it's really kind of neat to see it. You see it in the character interactions between the different versions of He-Man and Tila, but also the villains who are operating in it. Like, they understand that aspect, and they understand that that's part of it. And
Mhm.
so, I don't know. For me, as someone who obviously adores.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that for me, that stuff is such a given that I
Yeah.
wouldn't even say that that was something I focused on much when I was working on Revelation, or the comics, or Revolution. I didn't focus on it necessarily because it's so established. It's such an important thing. I know it's going to be there. I know we're writing it. What I loved was the opportunity to get to look at characters in a new way, just a slightly different way,
Mhm.
not reinvent them, but get a new angle on Evelyn and Orko, and even Scareglow, and characters, who in some ways were underserved previously, and try to flesh them out a little bit and give them, just a little bit more to play with, a little bit more for the actors to play with. We had to talk about great casts. I mean, we had great actors on that
Yeah.
show, and I really wanted to make sure that I was doing my part to deliver stuff for them that they could play and that they could really sink their teeth into, for an animated show, about Masters of the Universe. And so that's where my focus ended up more than anything. And I found joy in that. And to the point where getting to write the third issue of the prequel comics, which was an Evelyn story. And
Mhm.
I just, I could just write evil. I would love to just keep writing Evelyn as long as I could, and just keep exploring, because I haven't even scratched the surface yet. I think there's so much depth to that character, and it was there in the classic era. It was all sitting there.
Yeah.
Talk about not
Yep.
scratching the surface. It was right there, but nobody really delved into it in a real deep, meaningful way. And I think we were afforded the opportunity to do that, and we've been afforded that. And yeah, I'd do that again and again. And Orko too. Orko was a character who people made fun of. You know, when you talk about
Hmm.
the show growing up with us, and Orko is a tough sell as a character to grow up with us into adulthood. It's, in many ways, a lot of those characters, can't survive without a real grimdark transition reboot sort of
Yeah.
mentality to them.
Yeah.
That's what you normally see with a character like that, and we didn't want to do that. But we were still able to give him some additional life and some more stuff for the amazing Griffin Newman to play, that helped you see Orko a little bit differently. But he's still Orko, but now you're getting to see more sides of him. And that was those things were joyous. So there, my point is to say, so I got to play a little bit. Like I had a fight between, He-Man and Tila in episode 4 of Revelation, but it's
Right.
really
Right.
Tila having a fight with herself, um,
Hmm.
embodied through Scareglow's magic, and but taking the form of He-Man, but that inspires her to have a little bit of the conversation with him, a little bit of the get out a little bit of the stuff that she never got to say or wants to say, or and so we got to see a little bit of that relationship there, but on the whole, excuse me, I I was looking to dig for gold in characters we weren't expecting cool relationships from. I mean, everybody
Yeah.
expected to see He-Man and Tila as a
Sure.
duo. Nobody expected to see
Yeah.
Evelyn and Orko as a duo.
Yeah. 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 Well, you talk about,
Yeah.
digging for gold and finding diamonds. I think that's
Yeah.
what Evil Lyn and Orko, brought to the show. Like, it was something that I didn't expect. I never expected to see that much depth in those characters, but
And
it
it's
was
it's
such a
realized in their relationship too. That's how we
Mhm.
did it.
Mhm.
Like, in
Yeah.
order to elevate those characters and help you fall in love with them in a whole new way, we had to put the toys together. We took
Mm.
I took Evelyn and Orko and took them over here, and we put the toys together and played with them to see what would happen. And that's how character became revealed, and that's how it became enriched, because Orko because we get to see Evelyn through Orko's eyes and Orko through her eyes,
Mhm.
and that's how I shouldn't tell you how we do the magic tricks, but that's one of the magic tricks.
Well, it's a good magic trick. Oh, that's great. Man, I'm excited for Evolution. I wanna know all I can about it. And so
Soon, soon. I
I'm
don't know
real
that.
I'm real yeah, it yeah, someday,
Yeah.
but I don't know. I think, I guess going back to the prequel comics, this is something that I also latched onto with the work you did on the prequel comics. There's a moment where, He-Man is talking with King Grayskull in the past, and
Mm,
their son has just died,
mm,
and they tell He-Man his name. They say that, his name was Dare, and He-Man just has a short, very brief line where he says, your son's name will live on. As a fan who knows the canon and knows what could have been, and I immediately latched onto that. It's like, okay, well, again, here's an obvious point of evidence to, to kind of point to that relationship, is that it, my question is, I'm getting off topic. My question is that something that we will actually get to see fulfilled at some point? Maybe not even in Revolution, but maybe
You can't.
hopefully down the line.
You know,
That's a big question.
I can't answer things like that.
I gotta ask.
I will just say that like things like that, there are all kinds of little joys that go along with working in the Masters of the Universe kingdom in that realm of storytelling. And one of them was getting to make that connection, make that circuit, in a story that was about fathers and sons and about legacy and passing things on and passing things forward, to then have HeMan say, they're going to remember, his name will live on, or I forget how he put it, but that because if you're a fan, like it doesn't, it's a moment and it works on its own. But if you're a fan and that, spoiler alert for people, but that in parts of the canon in later life, He-Man and Tila marry and have a child named Dare, who becomes the new hero, then that's, you make that connection. It's a little bit of extra fun Easter egg nostalgia, a little bit of that stuff, but also
Easter eggs.
Tells you something about it tells you something about Adam. It tells you about what's important to him, and the way he feels about King Grayskull, and someone who is a historical figure to him, but who he's just briefly interacted with. But it just tells you about the kind of person that Adam is in that moment. So that was those kinds of little discoveries and moments are really exciting and important for me. And then the other thing is getting to name things like the Orlax of Primaria, or the Trollan Spellspring was one that I was particularly happy and proud of. The source of all Trollan magic, which I'm sure outraged parts of the community. But the thing is, remember, they're in sort of a Scareglow fictionalized version of Tralla, so who knows?
Who knows what's actually going on there?
So who knows?
Yeah. Well, Tim, I think I've run out of questions to ask you for today.
They were great questions, though, and I really appreciate you having me on. This has been really fun talking about all of this stuff with you. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to thank you again for joining me. It's always I always have so much fun talking to you. I think, it makes me smile when I get to talk with people like you, and I think you're great. So thank you for
fans
coming
of
on. I appreciate it.
We're fans of a feather.
Yes, exactly. I like that. Before I let you go, we kind of talked about it at first, but if you wanted to plug yourself, what's your plug?
Oh, yeah, no, I can't talk about stuff that's coming out. There's nothing on the horizon that I can talk about that's coming out, but I do want to say, since we got to talk a little bit about Flashpoint Beyond and Masters Revelation, the prequel comics, and a little bit about Teen Titans Academy, that all of those comics are out in trade, paperback and compilations now. So please pick them up, have a read. And I think there's probably a lot of people who watched the Revelation series, who maybe didn't pick up those books. And if you're hankering for more in that world, Kevin Smith and Rob David and I, put that story together, and as a sort of a ramp into the show. So check it out. So you can get all those things now. As for TV and other stuff, you'll just have to wait and see. But in the meantime, follow me on Twitter as long as it's still alive, as long as it still exists, And I hear every day about how it's not going to exist anymore. But
Right.
you can find me on there, and you can find me on
Yep. There's a new
Instagram.
scare every day.
So.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, very cool. Well, I think we should get on with our lives. We're both busy people, but
It's
this
nine
has been a
o'clock
fantastic treat.
p.m. here on the
So
West Coast. 9 p.m.
that's right. So all right.
Thanks,
Well,
man.
thank you, Tim.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks everybody for yeah, absolutely. Um, thank you for joining us on the Dad at Arms podcast, the Dad at Arms channel. You can find me. I am on Twitter at Red Pyramid 9, or just search Dad at Arms. I'm there. Also on Instagram at Dad at Arms. So anyway, everybody
Can I
have
say
a
to the
wonderful,
folks watching this,
yeah.
if you like content like this guy is pretty plugged in, and who knows what kind of fun guests he's going to have coming up. So you should like and subscribe.
Oh, thank you. Love it. All right, man. This has been great. Uh, have a good night, Tim.